I don't just want to be in the race for clean energy. I want us to win the race.
Net zero. Oh my God, isn't it awful? Tell you what, we're not even a part of it. Look at the numbers.
Net zero, you know what net zero, they have no idea what it means, by the way. It's net zero. What does that mean? Nobody knows.
Climate change has become a climate crisis, and a threat has now become a reality.
Zero carbon
East off. Hello and welcome to Zero Carbonista Series 6, The Cow in the Room. I'm Ian Collins and this is your number one go-to environment-based podcast. If it's green, it's in. Dale, this has been, I would suggest, one of the standout weeks of the last sort of 4 or 5 years since we've been doing this, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, if you mean media coverage-wise?
Well, I just think that everything that was happening in the Labour conference, and you were a big part of that, and you never seem to be out of the news this week, so I think we should talk through some of the reasons why TV cameras felt magnetised to the mighty Vince.
They couldn't get enough of me.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, I'm pooped. I got back last night and I spent the day recovering. It was really intense, right? All day long, doing fringe events, talks, interviews. Hard to find food, hard to get a drink in the evening. It was somebody described it to me, and I agree completely. It was an endurance event. The conference,
wow.
An endurance event.
Why was it hard to get a drink in the evening? It's f***ing Liverpool, for God's sake.
The bar, there was one bar on site, and it was 10 people deep all night. It was mental. It was one of them things, and there weren't enough food places and the food choices were restricted. Well, I know we're going to talk about food in a minute, but I'm hoping before we get back there next year that we'll have been able to intervene in the putting on of that conference, actually, particularly in regards to food choice.
And possibly how it's even powered.
Well, that's powered by the grid already, and I think that's okay. I think it's covered.
But the cow in the room everywhere over the course of these last few days.
Yeah, it kept coming up, really. I mean, I brought it up, but it was relevant. I wasn't just forcing it onto the agenda.
Yeah.
I did a couple of fringe events. One of them was the Climate and Nature Bill.
Yep.
And that was it was so relevant to that because I had to say to the audience, look, when it comes to the climate and to nature, there's something sat right square in the middle of them, and that's food, our food choice.
Yeah.
And that went down really well, actually. There's always a cheer when I say we need to talk about food. I must be talking in an echo chamber, but I'm always surprised by the number of people in the room that care, they get what I'm saying. And they're like, yeah, we need to do something. And then people come up to you afterwards and they're like, thanks for bringing food up as well. There was those people as well.
Well, we mentioned it last week, didn't we? And we mentioned it a gazillion times over the last few years. It's one part of this whole agenda that's been added as a kind of any other business. And in fact, it's much more than that. It's top of the agenda.
It's being overlooked. It is that big collective blind spot. I spent a lot of time in discussions about the climate, how bad that is and how serious it is. The decline of nature, ditto. And then I'm like, hey, guys, who here in this room eats animals?
Yeah.
Because you're driving the things that you're talking about here as being desperately important. And it's interesting because there's always a lot of people in the room, maybe 2/3 of the room, 3/4 of the room. Don't put their hand up because I express it in a positive way. Who here is plant-based? Just not to But actually, I'm going to get the most accurate answer that way.
Did the whole conference feel that this? I mean, obviously, Labour as a party and as a government have got a big old agenda on everything from sort of taxation to schools and God knows what else. In fact, we'll come back to schools. But did you feel that the green aspect of this government was very much prevalent?
Well, I went to 2 speeches, Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer, and then I just attended a whole bunch of events. And I think, in the fringe events, definitely, the climate was right up there, out in the crowd as well, the crowds of people that I met and stuff like that. In terms of government agenda, I would say it's quite hard to know because, the big policy decisions or announcements I thought would be in those 2 speeches, and there was a bit. But that's a different topic. The other story we're going to come to is related to food, isn't it? Which was schools. And it was like the surprising star of the agenda. I only mentioned it in my cow in the room talk. I had an actual dedicated cow in the room talk. And we had a cow that wasn't in the room. It was sat outside in the rain. Well, stood, actually. I don't think they sit.
Well, you mean like a real cow?
No, a plastic cow, but big, cow-sized.
Oh, I see, yeah.
It was real cow-sized. And I only mentioned in passing that actually one of the things I'd like to do in the Q&A, one of the things I'd like to do is remove this law that says that schools have to serve meat and dairy almost every day of the week to kids. I think it's wrong. The science has moved on and it's just wrong anyway from a choice point of view. And blimey,
Sure.
it went around the world. I want to say in a bad way, but there's no such thing really, I think, as bad publicity. The Daily Mail took it and twisted it like, some vegan dude says he wants to force vegan meals on school kids or something like that,
I was just going to say, it was massive. I mean, that aspect of the conference did get a lot of headlines. But whether the Mail are giving you a bit of a kicking, who cares, really? I mean, it started a debate.
Yeah, the way I look at it is, right, that's just the Daily Mail. They twist things. They know how to write headlines so that people read them and buy their newspaper or subscribe online, whatever you do. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
So I was laughing with somebody else saying, if people like the Daily Mail wrote headlines that said, nothing happening here, Gov, everything's nice, nobody's going to buy that paper twice, are they?
Of course they're
or
not.
maybe even
Of course
once. They're going to go, I don't want to read about that. I want to read about
Absolutely.
controversy and contradiction and hypocrisy. I mean, that's what they're built for.
Dale Vince feeds weeds to children is the headline that's going to get people clicking.
That's right. And I've had emails from people off the back of that Daily Mail article and some associated stuff saying, oh, you're a bad man, and not in such a nice way either. Like, and I've engaged with them. And one of them went from a rabid anti-immigrant. It's the fault of immigrants, actually, apparently, because they can't speak English or read it. And so schools struggle with the menus. That was the argument. I'm like, for sake. But I focused on the food and said, look, you got it wrong. All I'm saying is let's take away the obligation to have meat and dairy. I am not trying to ban meat and dairy. And he's like, oh, fair play. That's all right.
That's right. It's funny what a conversation does, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. And that's because at the moment, meat and dairy, I think, is sort of legislated into the school thing, isn't it?
It's mandatory. And all I'm saying is, well, let's take that away, right? Let's let kids, parents, and schools choose between them however they go about that. I don't know. It's an old law. I don't know how old it is. I'm going to find out. It's out of touch with the science. I mean, in the last week, we had Lord Darcy produce 2 reports on the NHS, and the second one was about how do we fix it? Or maybe it was an article in The Guardian, actually. I'm not really sure, but I think it was a report. And he said the way we fix the NHS is to fix everything around it. The way we live, what we eat, and how we exercise. And so this is perfectly on topic. If we're legislating to force unhealthy food on children in school, that's a fundamentally bad starting place. So I think it was on topic. I mean, I'm all fired up about it because I spent all week talking, honestly, from dawn till dusk and beyond dusk. And then I spent, hours trying to get a drink. It was a brilliant conference, though, honestly, because this school meal thing, landed like, landed like something very impactful. I don't know, a meteor or something like that. The Cow in the Room went down really well. Climate Nature Bill. Jenny Jones, we had a bit of green on green action, didn't we, in social media?
Well, I was about to say, I mean, look, I've known Jenny for a long time. She's, as you know, Dale, a very lovely person. Very decent. Every time I saw her, she used to bring me jam that she made at home and, very homely kind of character. But you've royally pissed her off, right?
Yeah. And again, it was a twisting of what I said. So the first fringe I did was entitled, how do we hold back the green tide or something like that? And it was talking about the Green Party and the surge in vote share this election. And I said, look, I've looked at the title. The first thing I said, I've looked at the title of this fringe. And I think that you've got it wrong. What you need to do, this being, the room full of Labour people, is become the green tide. Right? Don't fight the green tide, be the green tide, because that's how we win the next election. Adopt green policies, get the green economy moving. The Greens aren't our enemies, other than sometimes competing for votes.
But there's an interesting dynamic now, isn't there? Because the Greens are a party, so they need to find a kind of relevance.
They need votes.
And they need to sort of resonate. And if the Labour Party are doing, pretty much most of the things that they wanted to be done, then they've got a choice. They either stay silent or they kick off.
That's
and,
right. Jenny Jones kicked off.
She kicked off. She wrecked the place. She's not allowed back in Liverpool. Never upset the Jones when she's had a pina colada because she'll smash your freaking teeth in.
Well, just to be clear, she wasn't at the conference. She kicked off on social media and she's like, Dale, why are you always attacking the Greens? And honestly, my first thought is, excuse me, Jenny, every time I see you, you're attacking Labour. So that's a bit of a funny thing to say. But responded on social media to say, that's not what happened, Jenny. It was simply the title of the thing. And I said, actually, we need to be the tide, not fight the tide. And she's like, I think our policies are there if you want to, if Labour want to take them and put them into government. And I said, of course. And that's what I argue as well. There shouldn't be ownership of this green stuff. Good ideas should be shared by everybody. And then she agreed with me. And so that was all something over nothing.
There it is. All happy and all friends at the end of it. You might get some jam now, Dale. She'll bring you some.
I hope not. I'm a sugar phobe. Jam's bad for us.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's a bit shitter for the teeth, isn't it? It's not good. But
Not just that. I mean, diabetes, that little thing.
That's if you have it like as a main course.
Yeah, well,
You put a bit on toast, I think you're all right with that. I might order that tonight. Have a plate of jam, please, as a main.
And there was sausages. Do you want to talk sausages?
Yeah, well, just before we do, can I just go back to the school thing? Because another headline that came out of this conference is that you care more about children than pensioners.
Mm-hmm.
What is wrong with you, Dale Vince?
I was going to say this wasn't about food, but of course it was. But it began with the winter fuel payment being withdrawn from millions of pensioners. And I've been asked many times before the conference, did I agree with what Labour had done? And I always say yes. I think it was the right thing to do because there's a limited amount of money around and a lot of things to spend it on. And actually, the triple lock has looked after pensioners really well. In the last 10 years, it's dragged millions of them out of poverty. The graphs are very clear. Meanwhile, the rise in child poverty caused by the 2-child cap on benefits, for example, has lifted that line well above pensioners. So basically, my argument is millions more kids are in poverty than pensioners, and they're actually in food poverty. They can't afford to eat, and I think that's wrong. And so I think if this is part of a balanced approach, and I hope it is, that Labour do go on to do more for kids, then I get it, and I think it's it's the right move. So that was the food bit.
Got it. Could they not? I heard somebody the other day say, why don't they just chuck a 1% tax hike on people who earn over 300 grand or something like that? I don't know what the numbers were.
I'm a fan. I've been arguing for a change to the tax system to make it more just. At the moment we have a thing we call income tax, and it only applies to a job. And then for all other forms of actual income, like money made with investments, property, whatever it is, venture capitalists, we don't call it income. We call that capital gains. And the tax rate is half as much, right? And if we equalize those, we could raise about £12 billion a year. My argument in different terms is, why do we tax money made with a pair of hands at a higher rate than we tax money made with money? Poor people don't have money, they have a pair of hands. And people that have money are paying way less tax because the tax system was written by people with money for people with money. So I'm an advocate of tax reform.
I heard somebody the other day say, and they were a bit nuts, to be fair, but they said that...
Was it on your show?
Yes, of course it was. They said that capital gains tax should be 90%. And so I sort of count. Yeah, I mean, even Karl Marx didn't go there. I made the point in that case, if I bought another house and then I sold that house a couple of years later, I would essentially be asked to give it to the government. The level of tax would be so much that I'd be just giving away my house.
But it's only on the gain, the capital gains.
I know it's only on the gain, but I was trying to make it sound more dramatic, like a sort of Daily Mail reporter here.
Yeah, nice try.
So I would be giving away a lot of the stuff from my house. But the point is that you want to equalise it to the income tax bracket.
Yes.
So it'd be 45% and the like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's no argument for not doing that. There's no reason why if you make money with money, it doesn't count as income and you pay less tax. I say that. That just can't make sense, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But anyway, sausages, don't forget them. Just at least don't forget them. We don't have to do them now.
Yeah. I'm going to do a really snappy link here as if we didn't just say that.
Damn.
Hey, Dale, this conference was dominated by sausages.
Somebody said something really funny in response to that. Do you know what? I think it was on Sky News with Sophie Ridge and Aisha. She said, I always think of conference as a bit of a sausage fest. And
yes, I heard that. Yeah.
That was so funny. But yeah, I mean, it was Keir Starmer's speech. I missed it. I just didn't hear it. But he wanted to say hostages in regards to Gaza, and he says sausages. But I don't think he noticed.
It was a beautiful moment. And I, as somebody who kind of does this thing for a living of speaking and, sometimes publicly, mostly on radio and our podcast, and I can see exactly what happened there. I mean, because there is a sort of a connection, the hostages bit in the sausages bit, and his brain at that clear moment just saw some letters and
he was hungry.
Or he was hungry. He'd been on his feet for a good hour there. So I saw how it happened, but it was quite amusing, of course. But there's been many in that respect. Did you do one?
I did. I had my own sausage moment on Sky. We were talking about donors, which is a story that kept coming up, the clothes that was given to Keir Starmer before the election and whether it was reported correctly and all that kind of stuff, and whether we should even do it morally. And I think the top team now at Labour have come out and said they won't take gifts anymore.
Yeah.
I think that's a smart move, by the way, just to clean it up. This is another topic, donations to parties. I was arguing on Jeremy Vine. We either have to accept that donations fund political parties and we can make that work, or we accept that we can't make it work and we publicly fund parties and we don't allow donations. But at the moment, we're kind of in the middle. We've got this Tory inheritance of skepticism of a corrupt 14 years in power. And, Keir Starmer accepting some shirts and trousers and stuff looks like a crime. My sausage moment was to talk about donations, the topic of donations and how we respond to that. And I was super impressed with what Wes Streeting said. So I said, well, I agree with Les. I'm like, oh shit, I've just had a sausage moment and we all had a laugh about that.
I like that. For some reason, Les Dawson sprung into my head at that point, who was always wanging on about, the best way to do political. Yeah. Never take a shirt off an unnamed man. That's how he would have dealt with that, I think.
And we ended the piece on I want to say a less serious note, but actually the whole thing was a bit less serious, talking about how it happened. Did he even notice that he said it? So I've created a new conspiracy theory. I said, I like the idea that actually somebody sabotaged his auto cue.
Well, somebody did say that, but I don't think that happened.
That was me. That was me. Credit where it's due.
You were there, Dale. Yeah, I like the way you fess.
No, not the sabotage. Not the sabotage. No, the saying of it.
The saying of it. Sorry, I thought you meant you did it. I was going to say that would have been an extraordinary moment.
Wouldn't it? Just Stop Sausages did that.
Just Stop Sausages. That's what we need. Yeah. Well, maybe, you see, you also got yourself in a list this week, didn't you?
Oh, I
did.
The
Independent's inaugural Green 100.
That's probably the nicest list I'm on this week as a result.
It's a nice list to be on, but there's some weird shit happened in that list.
No, what I'm saying is probably the nicest list that I suddenly found myself on this week after speaking out about school dinners. I think I've appeared on a couple of lists as a result of that, is what I'm trying to say.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, so this list is quite sweet. The Independent have come up with a list of the world's top 100 influential people when it comes to climate. And they mailed us a couple of weeks ago and said, look, you're on it. Don't tell anybody. We're launching this week, actually, New York Climate Week or something like that. And we're like, yeah, sure thing. And then it comes out and me, Theresa May is ahead of me in the list. And I'm like, why? What has she done? What has she done? It's took the shine off it for me.
So did it explain what Teresa's green credentials were?
I think it does, because it explains mine. Mine are weird. Mine apparently are about bringing batteries to festivals and taking the diesel out of them. I'm thinking, oh shit, that's the thing I did last week. I've been doing this stuff for 30 years. Did you miss everything else? Or was it just unimportant?
Lazy journalists, you see. I think they just the big headline again. Well, I mean, that's kind of, they were probably looking for lots of different reasons why people do green stuff. But Theresa May, I don't know, when she was in government, I think she probably in her heart would have a sympathy to this. But I don't know whether that ever manifested in government.
I remember one thing. I remember laughing my socks off at a government announcement that they were going to take action in the space of electric cars. They were going to oblige motorway service stations to have a charging point, every motorway service station to have a charging point. And I'm like, shit. We did that 10 years ago. Did you miss that? Because they already have that. I mean, who's advising you? Have you been out in the world?
I've realised what it is. Do you remember when she was asked before the election that she went on to only just win, what's the most daring thing she did as a kid?
Yeah.
And she said, running through a field of corn.
Yep.
And I wonder whether it's that beautiful image of Theresa at one with non-animal nature that maybe put her there. She's the corn entry into the list.
Okay.
It's a very, very tenuous grasp, isn't it, of what might have happened at the list there.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything else she did. I was genuinely trying to think of policies that little era of the Conservative government did. And maybe perhaps they just left it all alone at that point.
Well, I hope, right, that it wasn't this announced policy of a charging point in every motorway service station, because that had already been done.
Should we do some questions?
Nah.
All right.
Actually, they're my favourite. They're my favourite, actually.
Let's rattle through some of these then. Right, Paul on X, what's the most interesting idea you heard at this year's Labour conference? Good question. Hard to answer.
Yeah, I'm not sure I heard any that interested me more than mine, which sounds a bit like arrogant. But
everything I said, that's the one.
Yeah, that might be the short answer. I'm trying to think.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't think of anything I heard that was interesting, apart from what I said.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough.
Let's go to Shazza.
Shazza says, How long till you're selling grass protein products to us punters then?
Well, I reckon we are 6 months away from food safety approval. And then we've just got to like set up in production and pesky little things like that. And I'm going to say this time next year. By this time next year, we should have it in burgers and sausages and things like that. We're going to make a grass-fed burger for fun. That'll be the first thing we do. And I think a protein powder as well for gym bunnies and that kind of stuff. We've found high levels of B12 in our protein. That's a good thing. It's a really interesting thing because one of the things I was saying to Ian Dale on the radio this week is that 96% of all of the B12 that we make in our country, we feed to animals because they live indoors all their lives. They never get exposed to grass. And actually, that's where B12 comes from. And he's like, yeah, but they don't all, do they? And I'm like, well, 90% live in sheds. And he's like, where'd you get these facts from? I said, I made them up. and everybody in the studio fell about laughing. But of course, I didn't make it up. It is true. Yeah. So yes, anyway, this time next year, they'll be out in the world. And
good work.
I can't wait. I have this crazy idea to get John Gummer to assist me in a little stunt to replicate what he did during the height of the mad cow disease, where he fed a burger on telly to his daughter, saying, this is safe enough. Look, I'm feeding it to my daughter. I want to feed John Gummer a grass-fed burger on telly to spoof that moment.
His daughter doesn't eat burgers now, Dale.
Apparently she's vegan.
Seriously?
And I don't know if there's a link. She's like, Dad, will you just feed me? It's disgusting. The whole mad cow disease thing was scary, right?
Just a little bit, yeah. I do know somebody who was affected by that, and it was horrendous, and it was real. It wasn't like
my bad.
Some conspiracy. No, not at all. No, I'm agreeing with you in the sense that John Gummer stood up there with literally no information or idea whatsoever, and just, I mean, what a stupid thing to do in a health crisis.
Yeah. No, I agree with you there. Maybe I won't work with him.
I don't know. It'd still be quite good. Maybe you could just stuff one of these. Maybe we could just hold him down and stuff a vegan burger in his face.
I know. We'll do it before we get food safety approval.
Good point.
That's the best.
That's what you need to do. Yeah. Test this out, Johnny boy. How's that? Let's rattle through then a bit of X-rated corner. This is where we troll social media so you don't have to. These are the ones that are not quite as kind. Ed says, really wish you'd f***ed off. You were as bad as Bill Gates. Next, you'll want meat banned.
Yeah. Well, read my headlines. I do want it banned. Ed. Eb.
Oh, yes, it was Eb.
But Bill Gates, I mean, please, come on. That's just so offensive. That's offensive. I mean, that's down and that should be beeped out. You're as bad as beep, beep.
But indeed, people have to guess who the name is. Like Elon Musk, for example. Oh, there's an Elon Musk story as well, isn't there?
There is. Yes. He's mouthing off on, let me think, X, Twitter, whatever, that twatty platform he bought. And can I say this? What a wanker. He's biting back at the UK for not inviting him to a meeting, to a business conference or something. Apparently he's bringing paedophiles into the conversation because he likes to do that. And apparently, he's miffed because he's been left off the invite list. But I think he's been left off for, the bad things he said on social media during the recent race riots.
It's a kind of curious set of responses from a bloke who runs it and is meant to be a serious businessman.
Oh, God, he's not serious, is he? Anyway, that was fun. That made me laugh, right? Because the idea that Musk is sulking because he didn't get an invite from our government.
I love it. He's
a big business conference. He can off to Mars, right?
Here's a question from Chris. Here's a question from Chris Shatcock.
I think you're right. That's how it's spelled.
It is. I can only read it out as it's written. Yeah. Mr. Shatcock says, let's be real, Vince.
Stop laughing at my name. He said, stop laughing at my name.
Let's be real, Vince. You've only apparently got 6 neurons left in your brain, so the next 5 you lose will be break, not make. You may as well take your money and set up in your ice-free Arctic. I'm sure the endangered polar bears will be happy to meet you.
I mean, it's so hard to know. I mean, I'm not sure why I'm about to lose 5 neurons or why I might think that would break me rather than make me. I mean, that's all kinds of wrong. But there you go. It's probably all in the name.
Probably all in the name. Fabio says, Dale Vince presents himself as the voice of righteousness. In reality, he is a self-serving green fanatic. Should not be listened to at all. Fab, it's not North Korea, mate. Come on. We've all got a view.
Listen, I'm fessing up to being a green fanatic, but not the self-serving part. As I told them on the Jeremy Vine show, I don't know where they got it from. They're like, you're trying to change school dinners to make yourself money, aren't you? I'm like, what? I don't believe you said that. Everything that I do, the whole campaigning for the green economy, green energy, all that kind of stuff, it's about the country. It's for the benefit of the country. I am a green fanatic. Absolutely. Is it for me? Absolutely not.
Final one from Big Ronnie, who says, when did Dale Vince become part of the Soros conspiracy? He's clearly a plant for Gates and Soros. There it is again.
Yeah. I think Big Ron, I think that happened just now. You made me part of the conspiracy because I haven't heard that before.
Well, no, indeed. I mean, that's like somebody's made it up, but kind of phrased it as if it's a thing, right?
It's a thing, it's a thing. Of course, well, I guess that's how it works, isn't it? Like, I heard this thing, did you know? Yeah, that's a thing, really? Oh, yeah, well, actually, it's only a thing because, I don't know.
Somebody made it up.
And repeated it to somebody else as if it was a thing. As if it was a thing.
Is that a thing? Yeah, how do you know it's a thing? Well, I said it, so it's a thing, right? Yeah, okay, well, I'll just tell everybody else and they'll all assume it's actually a thing.
And you've won when somebody repeats it to you and they say, hey, I heard this thing, and you think, I made that up.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe we should start making this stuff up ourselves, and when it comes back, we can sort of claim the victory for it, just to test the theory, the circular theory of thingness.
That's a good idea.
There it is. Dale, we're done, but we will speak in a week.
Thank for that.
Don't forget, of course, to follow this podcast. Then you get each new episode automatically. Follow Dale on social media, twitter.com/Dale Vince, facebook.com/Dale Vince, and on TikTok too.
Yeah, that one. This is a quick PS. I was on my way out the door after the podcast finished, and I realised I hadn't given a right answer completely to one of the listener questions that Ian put to me. Had I heard any good ideas at the conference? I said no. We had a bit of a laugh and a joke about it, and I realised actually I had. And it wasn't something I've not heard of before. It's using old coal mine water to heat homes. I've heard of it, but what I hadn't heard was it's been done in Gateshead, it's working, and crucially, that there are enough old mines in Britain to heat a quarter of our homes, 7.5 million homes. That's really interesting. It could fundamentally form part of the plan of how we decarbonise home heating in the mix with heat pumps and green gas. So maybe more on that next episode.
Zero carbon
East of